NBL Now is back for another week as we build up to round two, round one in the rear view. What a fascinating opening round of the season it was. Joel Peterson with you. Of course, NBL Now, thanks to Code Sports, your home of NBL coverage. And we've got some big breaking news that we'll get to very soon as well. Joining me is two-time NBL champion Andrew Parkinson. Parky, welcome to the show.
Thanks, JP. It's a pleasure to be here. And we've got the newsbreaker in this morning. The first time for NBL Now. I feel honoured.
We do indeed. We're going with a stacked roster this morning. We've gone from a two-man game to a three-man operation because Mick Randall from Code Sports has been all across the unfolding Montrezl Harrell Adelaide 36ers drama that's just percolating in the background at the moment. It seems, Mick, like it hasn't quite yet reached a resolution. Bring us up to speed with your latest reporting for Code Sports.
Yeah, Parky, Joel, you're too kind, but I mean, the biggest name in the NBL, it's really looking like he might be out the door. I mean, it's an interesting situation. I mean, we go back to July in China where it comes out that he's returned a positive test to basically to cannabis, and it was big news, and then it disappeared, and he went and played in Puerto Rico. He went and played in the Big Three, came back, and it seemed all hunky-dory, but I think it's crept up on the Sixers, and it left a lot of official scrambling, and, it looks like with all his tweets, he's like, yep, I'm out the door, but we can't get anything official out of the club, out of Basketball Australia, out of the NBL, and I think there's a lot to play out with Chinada being involved and China basketball, and it's just it was so exciting that we were going to see Trez back. I caught up with him only a couple of weeks ago just after he returned, and he looked so fit and so strong and so engaged and ready to go. And now it really feels like we may not see him at all. And, Adelaide are going to be forced to pivot because he is facing some kind of ban, but even that's been hard to find out exactly. It's looking like 1 to 3 months, but how does playing in Puerto Rico affect that? There's just so many questions right now that we can't answer.
And he is really the sort of the author of his own story at the moment, just through his post on X at the moment, Mick. As you said, there's no one else really saying much, but Trez is having a little bit to say, and maybe isn't liking some of what's being said out there. Where does this go next, do you think? Like, what does this mean for the 36ers? They've got 2 import slots available. Clearly, they've got a loaded roster, and they are gearing up to try and win a championship. Like, they could not have made a clearer statement of intent in that regard. Where do you think this gets to next?
It's really interesting, and the little bit that I have been able to get out of the Sixers is that it's not a panic, right? It's like, okay, like if you've still got Bryce Cotton, you've still got Big Zylan Cheatham, you've still got Isaac Humphries, you've still got DJ, you've still got Flynn Cameron. They've got a really good, bones of a roster. Bryce is going to become a citizen. So, you looked at their roster and go, okay, were the 3 bigs going to work? That was a question that they were going to have to figure out how to answer. Well, if Montrez is out, they don't really have to answer that now. It's like, do they play ice and get maybe more of a stretch 4 that can play out, and you just have the big inside, and it's like everyone can hit the 3, and it sort of just gives them more balance. And then obviously there were questions about that point guard spot that, they're like everyone was going to be a ball handler, and, Bryce obviously has that gravity, but he's just as effective off the ball as he is on it. So you want to be able to, have someone there that can facilitate if you do want him, coming off screens and things like that. So they can really pivot now. I mean, I don't think there's a panic in there. I mean, I think there's a disappointment that, he's a great player, Montrez, right? And last year there were criticisms about his defense, but he was coming in off 12 months off after doing his knee. So he'd run up the floor and he'd be gassed. Like, he even said that to me. He said, I had no fitness. I was just doing my best. And he averaged 20 and 10. Like, that's freakish. Like, I was looking forward to seeing what he could do this year being fit. Like, he said to me that I think he was like a kilo off his playing weight back when he won 6th Man of the Year. Like, that was one of his goals in the off season, to get to that if he did come back to Australia. So we had all these great things to look forward to, plus, the excitement of seeing him on the floor, and what he does and what he brings and the surprises that he would bring out. But like I said, I don't think it's disastrous for the Sixers. I think that they can pivot now. I think that If you look at what they did in the offseason by getting Bryce and getting Zolan, like it was just like bang, bang. And then Montrez coming back, like they're ready to give this thing a shake. And I think that they'll look at some sort of, something stretchy up front, and I think they'll look at a point guard. I mean, I think they did speak to Derek Walton Jr. at some point about, hey, if this Bryce thing does happen, would you be interested in coming and running the point alongside him? I don't think that's going to happen. He's playing in Israel, but I think that is an indication of the thinking for the Sixers moving forward.
Fascinating situation. Sounds like there's still a bit to play out as far as this goes. Of course, all the reporting it's at Code Sports, so jump on the website or the app to get all the latest from Mick and the team. Mick, really appreciate you jumping on to bring us up to speed.
Thanks so much for having me, boys.
Mick Randall from Code Sports joining us. So it's a fascinating story, Parky, and the way that it's unfolded and sort of, I guess, some of the question marks that are still around this are some of the more interesting parts of what we're dealing with here. What's your take on it? And I'm interested in, from a locker room perspective, how unsettling would this be for Adelaide right on the eve of the season?
Yeah, no, I think it'd be very unsettling, JP. I think, as Mick just mentioned, I mean, this guy, he was 20-10 when he wasn't fit. And, coming into this season, I think he was a huge part. I think he just fits in perfectly. And I think once he knew Bryce Cotton was signed, I think that's when he jumped on board. So he really wanted to play with Bryce. And I think, they've got those shooting guard spots covered. And as Mick said, they might be looking for a point guard, but I think temporarily they might want to get someone to plug into that 4 spot, that spot that Trez played. Because I think, they've got Ice at the 5 spot there, Isaac Humphries. Yeah, so they've got a pretty deep roster, but they do need that big monster, so to speak, in that 4 spot.
Especially no Ben Grishti at the moment, so one of their backup bigs is down as well, which is why they've got the 2 roster slots available. So Code Sports will have all the latest on that story as it unfolds. Of course, Adelaide into the fray against Brisbane this coming weekend for their season opener. So still a little bit of time before we get to see the 36ers. Round 1 is in the books, Parky. So I'm interested in a couple of takeaways from you before we turn our attention to other things. First of all, who impressed you most, player or team? Who caught your eye?
Well, I'm going to go both here. Well, they're both, the Melbourne United, I think the first team to 2 wins, they were very impressive. Going into Tassie on that Thursday night on the home opener for the Jack Jumpers without CG43, to be able to get that win and then, of course, back it up on Sunday by smacking the Breakers. So I think, to get to 2-0 without CG43, Jesse Edwards was a real surprise. He doesn't look like he needs to be serviced too much, and he's going to, play that dunking spot, that sort of lob threat that Shea and Walker will be throwing a lot of ball to. So, so United really did impress me, JP, on the weekend.
And a big disappointment, was there one particular thing that you were left sort of scratching your head with?
Yeah, well, my personal disappointment was to see Mitch Norton go down with a knee injury, I think 8 minutes into the season. But I guess the team, or the thing that was most disappointing, were the New Zealand Breakers. I mean, after winning the Blitz, the NBL Blitz, I know PJC's carrying a little bit of a rib injury, I think, and they were without Meninga on the Sunday game against United when they lost by 32 points. So the Breakers for me were the disappointment. On the weekend being 0-2. So I think, and the contrast in those 2 teams was on display on Sunday when Melbourne United, got off to a 20-point lead in the first quarter and just, never looked back.
A different level of intensity that they were operating with on Sunday. Of New Zealand have got Perth coming in this coming weekend, so that'll be a big test for them, no doubt. Speaking of the Perth Wildcats, there were some interesting comments made over the weekend about them by the Tasmania coach, Scott Roth, who said he didn't know a lot about that Perth roster. That was his take on that situation. What did you make? And there's been a lot said about that. Obviously, they go and win in a low-scoring game over at RAC Arena in the end, the Jack Jumpers. But what did you make of the way that play out? And do you like that kind of thing?
Well, you're absolutely right, and I have no idea who's on Perth roster or anything because I don't follow the NBL stuff. So I'll get all that stuff loaded up on my computer tomorrow morning and watch on the flight over there. But I couldn't tell you 2 cents about Perth. I haven't seen them play this year. I got no clue.
Look, I didn't mind it at all. I think even though we can bag him if we want JP, because apparently he doesn't follow the NBL stuff. So that was an interesting comment. So we can bag him today, knowing that we're not going to get any blowback. But no, I say that in jest. But I also say in jest that maybe he's spending more time on cardio than he is on scouting teams, because he's lost 20 pounds. He was quite happy to tell Kelsey that the other night in the pre-game interview. But I think after the game, JP, I think he was still involved in that United game, and I think he just had a heartbreaking loss. And the guy that used to play for him and won a championship alongside him killed him. So I think he was still in United mode. So yeah, I think it was a bit tongue in cheek, and it came after that, heartbreaking loss. But I think he made up for it in his presser after the Perth win on Saturday night. He came out. He's very respectful to the Perth organisation and told them how they helped him sort of get the job, and he also gave a shout out to Alana Smith for winning Defensive Player of the Year and the WNBA. So he seems to be across a lot of things, but he wasn't across the actual Perth Wildcats that he was playing. But, he did also qualify it and say that on the plane ride over to Perth, which is a good 4.5, 5 hours, he was going to load it up. And I'm sure his assistants were doing a lot of the scouting leading into that game. But, the way coaches work, and I know this was the case with Brian Gorgon when I played for him, is that a lot of the times they were just focused sometimes on us, on the team, not so much them, the opposition. So, yeah, but he's a bit quirky. Scott Roth, I've got a lot of respect for him. He's a great coach. He's a championship coach. But we've got to remember his background. Don Nelson, who's the quirkiest NBA coach, I think, in the history of NBA coaches, has had a big influence on him. And, and I think he referenced Don Nelson. He's referenced him before many times in press conferences. So, yeah, Don Nelson is pretty quirky. I think Scott Ross got a little bit, a little bit going like that for him as well.
Yeah, he certainly does. It's just you're speaking to your fans in press conferences as well. So there's a line to be walked among all that. But equally, you are also speaking to sometimes your team and the opposition. So some coaches like to pull strings in those situations, and Scott Roth is certainly one of those. As long as it's done in a respectful manner, then fair play to him. The Adelaide, sort of the other side of their weekend, aside from the Montrezl Harrell stuff, was that they actually did step out on the court for the first time. We got to see Bryce Cotton in blue for the first time, and it looked a lot like Bryce Cotton in red. What did you make of what he was able to put together over the weekend?
Yeah, no, it was great. Well, it was great first to see how the NBL, how we, I guess, stacked up against some European giants. But no, I was pretty impressed with the first half of the 36ers. And I'll tell you what, if Bryce Cotton and DJ can average 46 points and 12 assists between them, which accounted for 70-odd points or so, if they can do that in the NBL season, then I think the 36ers are going to be pretty tough, depending what happens with the Montrezl Harrell sort of situation. But no, what let the 36ers down was their defense. Panathinaikos scored 67 points in the second half, and that's just too many. And I think that's my main concern with the 36ers. Bryce Cotton seems like he'll fit in there pretty seamlessly. He had nine assists himself in that game, so to have 24 points and 9 assists, I think is a great game. So yeah, and it was interesting to see Vrenz Blaženberg. Is that how you pronounce it, JP? He popped up there after being sacked from the Phoenix.
Yeah, Vrenz Blaženberg. So you never know. He might be, he may be an option to fill a spot for them, at least temporarily. Your comments around the defensive concern are interesting. So where are you on sort of a panic scale in terms of that 36ers defense? Is it a mid-level concern? Is it something you're really strong about that could upend their season?
Yeah, look, I don't think they're going to have a problem scoring, JP. I mean, it was quite evident, even against a powerhouse like Panathinaikos. They still managed to, I guess throw up a winning score, but the defense just let them down. So, yeah, that's my main concern for the 36ers. Offensively, and I mean, they shot pretty well. They were 11 from 27 from three, but Panathinaikos were 52%. They were 15 from 29 from three. So, yeah, I just think with the moves that Adelaide are going to make, I think they'll be probably looking for, for some defense, whether they get that from the guard spot or from more of a forward position, especially if they're going to replace Trez. They might be looking for that, more of a defender sort of type player.
Round 2 kicks off Thursday night. Of course, it's a public holiday in Victoria on Friday ahead of the grand final. So the Thursday night public holiday eve game is a throwdown between Melbourne United and South East Melbourne, two teams that have got big aspirations in NBL 26, as you mentioned. Melbourne United 2 wins over the weekend. South East Melbourne with an absolute evisceration of the Cairns Taipans by 37 points. The rivalry between these two teams just seems to be building ever so gradually, especially with South East Melbourne being more competitive last year and, of course, making the postseason and putting together a really impressive run, and Melbourne United are always there or thereabouts. Where does this rivalry stack up in your mind compared to where, the rivalry between your Magic and the Tigers back in the day, or some of those great rivalries across the course of the competition?
Yeah, no, I think it's not quite there yet, JP. Like you say, I think it's gradually building. But I'll name drop him again, but I was speaking to Brian Gorgon yesterday, my old coach, about this exact topic. And unless they're hiding it well between the Phoenix and United, there doesn't seem to be. There was actual hatred between the Tigers and the Magic in the 90s, and that all came about because we played against each other in big-time finals. And, the 92 grand final series, we beat them. The 93 series, they beat us in the semis. 96, we played them in the grand final series and beat them. And then 97, they beat us in the grand final series. I had my thing going with Ray Gordon where, he knocked me out in a preseason game, for goodness sake, and got 3 months suspension for it. And the benches were cleared and Brian Gorgon got fined and I got fined. So having the contrasting teams between the Magic and Giants was great because you had Lindsay Gaze, who, used to sit there with his legs crossed on the bench, and we had the cocky young American coach, Brian Gorgon, pacing the sidelines with his Diet Coke and, rubbing his hair and sort of pacing along the sidelines. So, they were the family club. We were the men in black, so there was that contrasting style as well. And, I remember Bradkey came out once in the newspaper and, called us soft. And then that very next game, I think we came out and just pounded him with, 4 fouls straight away, sort of to send a message. And Copes and Gazy, although he was called, referred to Drewy back in the 90s. So it's hard for me to start calling him Gazy now, but he's known as Gazy. But to me, he'll always be Drewy. But Gazy and Copes had a radio show on Triple M, and I know, they got me to do an interview before a game, and we used to poke fun at each other. And so now there were a lot of, they had the Hoodlums as well, which was their cheer squad, I guess, if you want to put it that way. And they used to personally attack me with chants and songs, and they actually put a song in their pre-game program that they used to sing along to me. Which I'll save that for another episode. So I think the Phoenix and United, I think have met. I think in the early years, I think they met once in the playoffs. But I think once you start knocking each other out in playoffs, and it comes down to championships, and I think that's when the rivalry really builds, and that's what was special about that Magic, the Magic and Tigers sort of rivalry. But it'll get there. Hopefully it'll get there. And I think this Thursday night will hopefully, sort of help with that rivalry. Both teams are undefeated. So, even though it's early season, this is going to be a big game Thursday night.
I just need a little bit of bad blood to be drawn between these two teams. That's what we need, just to spice it up a bit. I like the sound of that.
Yeah. The Mick Creek dunk on Daly, and I think Peatling came in and pushed him, and that reminded me a little bit more of that sort of Tigers Magic rivalry, and I think that was really good for the game. No one was hurt. It was all a bit of push and shove, and Creek did that monster dunk on him. So you sort of need a few plays, you need a few things like that, to happen. But I can see it getting there.
A couple more before we get out of here. We've got players on $1 million plus in this competition. Of course, Jack McVeigh and the Cairns Taipans, they had a tough start to their season. The pressure of being on that kind of money, do you think that would be I don't know, would it be weighing on some of these players? Would they just be out there doing their job? And where does that stack up to sort of some of the pressures maybe that you faced in your career or that you were aware of players having?
Yeah, look, I don't think it's a problem. I think it's a little bit unfair on Jack as well, because unlike the NBA, we're really not meant to know, what these NBL guys are getting. So, and we kind of know maybe, Cotton's obviously $1 million man, maybe, Trez was or is, Cooks, JLA maybe, KD, Daly, guys like that. So there could be some other guys that have got that sort of 1 million or in that sort of range. So I think it's a bit unfair to sort of just look at Jack and say, okay, $1 million, is he worth $1 million? Look, maybe he's only worth 800, maybe he's worth 800, but to get him to Cairns, they needed to sort of top him up. And mind you, getting 1 million playing for the Cairns Taipans is like getting 1.3 million to play for the Kings. If you bring in the cost of living or just for housing, I think he's got a young family. I think to house your family in Cairns, it's going to be a lot cheaper to house in Sydney. So that 1 million he's getting is a pretty good whack.
It's a nice problem to have if it is a problem, but I'm sure that he'll make plenty of case and make it worth it over the course of the season, no doubt. And speaking of big players, we get to see JaVale McGee for the first time this weekend in an NBL setting. That is, so of course he's been over at the Intercontinental Cup with the Illawarra Hawks. One of the biggest names that the NBL has ever seen. Who was the big name back in your day when you were playing? Did we have a JaVale McGee equivalent come into the competition at any point?
Yeah, well, McGee's he's a 3-time NBA champion. 17 and 18 with the Warriors, and then 20 with the Lakers, and then he won a gold medal with the US team in Tokyo in 21. So, yeah, I don't think we've had anyone quite with his credentials. The one that I thought of when I looked at this question was Adrian Branch. I don't know if you remember him in the 90s, JP, but he came over after winning a championship with the Lakers, but his knees were done. He played for the Supercats and the Bullets, I think. So he was a bit of a flop, to be honest, when he came over. I don't expect that from McGee. But no, as far as I know Ricky Grace, he came from college from Oklahoma. You got D-Mac when he came out in the mid-90s for the Giants. Rob Rose, the guy that I played with, actually won the first championship with Rob Rose, and I don't think we would have done it without him. So, yeah, there's some big names that came across, but I think as far as his NBA credentials, you can't get any better than a 3-time champion.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive stuff. Big name, and he's going to be a big presence for that Illawarra Hawks team. There is no doubt about that. Parky, it's been great chatting hoops with you. Look forward to doing it again soon.
No worries, JP. It was a pleasure.
Andrew Parkinson with you on NBL Now. Thanks for your company as well. Of course, Code Sports for the latest on that Montrezl Harrell Adelaide 36ers story. They've got your NBL covered like no one else. Expert analysis, insider access on and off the court. Head to codesports.com.au today. Plenty more NBL Now throughout the week as we build up to round 2.